Marvel Rivals has quite the abundance of heroes, around 48 heroes in the game currently, all falling into 3 separate roles: Vanguards, Duelists, and Strategists, and honestly, it could be quite confusing understanding how to play against each and every single one. Lucky enough, I'm here to teach you how to counter each and every single hero. Whether it's some form of strategy or direct hero counters, this is the spot to learn everything you need to know. My name's Doug Films, and if you like this type of content, want to see more, or you're just a fan of Marvel Rivals or Deadlock, make sure to come check out the channel and share this video to a friend who needs to understand counters. But without further ado, I hope you sit back, relax, and enjoy this show. Now, kicking things off, we begin with Doctor Strange. Now, for Doctor Strange, a lot of the ways to counter this character have remained constant throughout each and every single season, but the key to beating Strange is really simple. All you have to do is break his shield. You want to use consistent damage, such as Punisher, Squirrel Girl, or any characters that are going to do a lot of burst damage to his shield. You can also throw melee characters into the mix because they completely ignore the shield, and you want to flank him constantly to force him to turn around, because when he's turned around, he's not shielding for the rest of his team because you're pulling aggro or pulling attention to yourself. Getting tanks to turn around in a majority of cases is a really good idea, and it allows a lot of exposed areas to be exploited. This same strategy can be applied to pretty much every single Vanguard in the game: Doctor Strange, Magneto, Angela, anybody that forces the tank's attention away to let your team push up. Another big tip for Doctor Strange is that you can cancel his ultimate with any crowd control effect, and if you cancel it, it drops to 50% charge, so you need to be ready for it again eventually when he builds it back up. Understanding that it's dropped to 50% and that he can regain all of this charge is something to understand when you're trying to time ultimates correctly in ranked. Then moving on to our big green friend is Hulk. Now, Hulk is all about punishing bad positioning. You want to focus him when he dives too deep. You want to wait for his gamma shield, then crowd control him. So you want to lock him down and burst him quickly. A lot of your best counters are characters like Wolverine, Iron Fist, Punisher, Winter Soldier, just to name a couple. Yes, there are a ton of them, but basically those are your main. Your biggest rule is that if he's isolated, try to crowd control him as fast as possible, then go and try to delete him as quickly as possible. The longer he's in your backline causing a ruckus, the longer it's going to be taking for your team to get the proper healing, proper damage, proper peeling, everything, whatever the case may be in that scenario. Moving on to Captain America, he kind of fits in the same realm as Hulk or any of the other diving Vanguards in the game, where that you want to make him as useless as possible. The big first thing being to break his shield. It's not a massive shield, so breaking it is really easy. Then you want to use some form of chain crowd control effects, whether it's a stun into a freeze, hook into a knockup, you get the idea. Then after that, you want to focus fire him. You don't want to let him reset or anything like that, because if he can reset, he's just going to keep going back into your backline. Your main direct hero counters are things like The Thing, Thor, Emma Frost. You could throw Storm into the mix for tracking, Human Torch, a ton of other characters as well. It's all about if you can lock the character down and just burst them down and focus fire. It's a lot easier said than done, but truly this is how the best way to shut him down. Now, moving on to Groot. Similar to back in Season 6 and Season 7, he's still completely insane. Your best idea is you need to destroy his walls as soon as possible, especially his giant wall. This makes him unstoppable or unable to be hit by crowd control effects, that being like things like Hook from Winter Soldier and so on. So you want to use a ton of vertical pressure. This could be instance like Iron Man, Storm, Human Torch, or Ultron for instance as well. Your best counters are going to be Punisher to shred the walls, Squirrel Girl to shred walls, Wolverine to try to kidnap him after you shred said wall. The whole idea is trying to dump as much damage as you can into him so that you can avoid his just nuisance as a whole. You ever eat something and it just sticks with you, or you're having a craving of nicotine, or you're looking not necessarily for a snack, but some sort of gum alternative? Then I'm talking about that moment. That's why I've been using Natura Pine toothpicks. These aren't your cheap, flimsy toothpicks that snap in 2 seconds. Natura Pine toothpicks are made by natural pine wood. They're sturdy, smooth, and honestly just feel way better to use. No weird aftertaste, no splintering, just clean, simple, reliable. I keep a pack at my desk in the car, basically everywhere, because once you start using good toothpicks, you honestly can't go back. So if you're about the little things, like actually finishing a meal properly, or you're trying to curb that craving that you have for nicotine or anything like that, honestly, you should definitely try these out. And if you want to try them out, make sure to use the link in the description or in the pinned comments. Use Duck for 10% at the checkout, and honestly, trust me, your teeth will thank you. With that out of the way, let's dive back in. So let's talk about Magneto. Now, he's still possibly, and honestly, probably one of the best things in the entire game still. You want to wait for his shield cooldown, so it's about a 10-second window, then dump everything. Honestly, the character does a lot of damage. Your best way is to counter him, just try to burn his shield as much and as often as possible. Try to get him to turn around to pull aggro, pull attention so he's not looking at your entire team. Your best counters are things like Wolverine, Iron Fist, Magik, characters that are able to bypass his shield. Or you can also think of melee tanks like Emma, Hulk, Thing. You can even throw Rogue into the mix as well. And bonus, Adam Warlock and Loki can counter his ult, both with Soul Bond and Loki's regeneration domains. And if you want to, Punisher can trade his ultimate as well, but it's a risky statement, a risky chance to go for. You can drain his ultimate by dumping all of your ult as Punisher into it, but you do risk dying as well, so it's probably not the best recommendation, but you can do it. Moving on, we have Peni Parker, who's probably one of the easier characters in the game to counter, because the big objective is to destroy her nest. You get rid of the generators, she gets no healing, no buffs, and you need to avoid choke points. Usually Peni players are set up in choke points, and just understanding where she's going to be placing her mines around the map, knowing common hotspots, health packs, everything like that is probably where she's going to be having mines. So avoiding those lanes, those health packs, or obstacles is definitely a plus, a big idea, a big preference on trying to dodge all that, explosive damage. Your best direct hero counters are characters like Hela, Punisher. You can also throw Storm, Iron Man, Human Torch into the mix, Hawkeye as well. Basically, the characters that succeed from going against targets that have a rather large hitbox. Those are typically your hit scan characters, or characters that do a lot of burst damage. Punisher, it's not necessarily burst damage, more sustained, but you get the picture. Then moving on to Thor. Now, Thor is, rather vulnerable after cooldowns, and he's definitely a lot stronger in Season 7, but the biggest ideas are to punish him after he dashes, after he uses his hammer, after he uses his Awakening Rune. You want to keep the distance from him, and you want to use crowd control effects to, constantly lock him down and constantly keep him under wraps. Your best counters are going to be the characters that pretty much counter a lot of the vanguards in this game, and that is going to be a lot of your DPS characters. Your Punisher, your Hela, your Winter Soldier, your Hawkeye, your Phoenix, the characters that love having or playing against characters that have a large hitbox. Hit scan players, they love this when there's an enemy with a large hitbox. So if you can use that to your advantage, it's always going to be a win-win. Moving on to Venom. So Venom is a super engage heavy vanguard or tank, however you want to describe him as. But basically, you want to burst him down when he engages, and you want to break his temporary HP quickly, which is the symbiotic resilience. And then you want to use crowd control to stop his ability. Your best counters are characters like Punisher, Squirrel Girl, Emma Frost, Thing. Characters that can just basically jump onto him and dump a ton of damage. Now, shocker, in the Vanguard section, the counter to a lot of the Vanguards in this game is, well, crowd control effects. Who would have guessed that? Because crowd control is usually the best way to stop any character that has a large health pool, and that can pretty much come from any game you've ever played, whether it's Overwatch, Deadlock. You can even go to World of Warcraft or other games. Trying to lock down characters with a rather large health pool is the best way to get rid of them. But anyways, here's the thing. So with the Thing, you want to stay at range. He's a character that likes to close the distance and get on top of his enemies. So your best idea is, well, to play at a medium-ish range. Yes, he can close the gap with both his Yancey Street charge and his ability to leap to enemies as well. Basically, you want to isolate him from supports as best as you can, then you want to burst him before he closes the distance. All of the time, sometimes they get a little bit carried away, so trying to keep him segmented away from his team is usually the best option. Your best counters are going to be characters like Wolverine. Yes, he can't pick him up. Yes, he does a lot of shred because he is a Vanguard. All of that is true. Keep that in mind. Punisher, Winter Soldier, Phoenix, Hela, Hawkeye, all of the above and more. You can also have Groot in this section as well, because if the thing is trying to do a Yancey Street charge or do anything, using walls or shields to heal block them are super ideal, breaking the line of sight of supports to the Vanguard. Anyways, moving on to Emma Frost. Now, in Season 7, she's definitely a lot weaker than what she used to be back in the early seasons of the game, but she still can do a lot of damage despite it or not. You want to play it at a longer range because of her beam. You want to punish her after she uses her diamond form, as it's on a relatively long cooldown, and out of that diamond form, you can use your crowd control effects, whether it's a Wolverine grab, Angela grab, or any other sort of crowd control effect. Your best counters can be Hela, Hawkeye, Phoenix, Punisher. I like Punisher because when Punisher uses his ultimate, he's unstoppable. And when Emma Frost uses her ultimate, she isn't unstoppable per se, but she can receive a lot of damage because Punisher will just be dumping damage into her, so a pretty solid counter in my eyes. Moving on to Angela. Now, Angela is a really solid Vanguard, a top tier Vanguard. Your whole idea is to basically turn your side of the map into a no-flying zone. Using whatever means possible to keep her grounded is the best outcome, because when she's in the air, she can go for kidnaps on your supports, your vanguards, your duelists, pretty much all of them, and just really annoying to deal with. So trying to ground her immediately and as often as possible with whatever means necessary. You want to break her shield immediately as well. It's not the biggest shield in the world, but it is a shield that you will have to break. And while she's on the ground, using your different forms of crowd control effects is certainly ideal. Characters like Punisher, Starlord, Winter Soldier with his grounding ability, Hela, Phoenix, any of the hit scan heroes will all excel because it is a flying character at the end of the day, so using hit scan characters is one of the best ways of dealing with her. Invisible Woman is another good idea of trying to keep her grounded. Moving on to Rogue. Guess what? Shocker, crowd control shuts her down completely, just like any character in this game. She struggles a lot with ranged heroes. Yes, she can close the distance with some of her abilities, but keeping her played at range is definitely the most ideal thing. Whether it's an Invis Woman, trying to push her away from your hit scan players, Hela, Storm, or any other ranged DPS are good ideas. If you can maintain the distance on her, she can't get a lot of value. She starts getting value when you start not paying attention to her. She starts pulling off these flanks. She starts pulling off these off angles that maybe you weren't necessarily expecting, but these are things you should be keeping in mind and thinking about. Moving on to Tank Deadpool, one of, if not the best tank in the entire game currently. Of course, that's up for debate, but the whole, this whole character design is rather rough to deal with. So basically, you want to burst through his healing, you want to destroy his shield that he puts down, the unicorn one, as fast as possible. Then you need to stop his movement and momentum as much and as often as possible. So you guessed it, using crowd control effects. Characters like Emma Frost, anything to try to stop him from getting jackpot is the whole idea. The character is rather strong if played properly and can utterly and completely dominate a game. Again, your crowd control characters are most ideal. Punisher is also a really good idea. The characters that can just dump a ton of damage to him, and so it makes him play a little bit more safe or force him to swap. Trying to get this character out of the game is probably one of your best ideas. And if you're playing in an elo that has the system to banning Tank Deadpool isn't that bad of an idea, honestly, because how strong he actually is. Moving on to Black Panther in our duelist section. So Black Panther, you want to punish his cooldowns. He doesn't really have those audio cues anymore, which is great. Then you want to communicate when he's looking to dive. So coordinating with your team, talking to your teammates is an amazing way to shut him down. As he is a flanking and dive duelist, your biggest counters, your direct counters, still pretty much remain the same. Winter Soldier, Mantis, Namor, Hela, Phoenix, all of the heroes that can, have some sort of crowd control effect just completely shut him down. For Black Widow, the only real way to shut this character down is avoid open line of sights and to do multiple dives. So diving with a couple of characters, whether a Psylocke plus a Venom or Captain America, all these characters can be interchangeable, but the whole idea is to dive together to shut down the one persistent duelist on the enemy team. So unfortunately, coordination is going to be the biggest factor in whether you can shut the character down or not. you never really want to look to solo engage. Then moving on to Hawkeye, it's the same idea as Black Widow. You want to dive him, you want to break the line of sight as often and as much as possible because he thrives when he has that line of sight. You always want to try to force him on a left-hand peek instead of a right-hand peek because he can easily shoot you from a right-hand peek because he can charge his arrow up behind cover, then peek out. So trying to force him into angles that doesn't help him in any way are great ideas. A lot of your best counters are going to be your diving duelists. You could throw Hela and Black Widow into the mix as well because they can kind of outrange him in a way. You also have Phoenix, and that's really about it. Following that, we move on to Hela, and again, the same exact idea as both Hawkeye and Black Widow. You want to use a multiple dive in coordination, whether it's a Captain America plus a Psylocke or any sort of mixed dive combination will always excel extremely well at these stationary duelists. I say stationary because they kind of have to stay in a stationed location to pump out a lot of damage, although these characters do have a lot of movement abilities for whatever reason. Trying to force that out early, then diving or looking to re-hit as often as possible, just to maintain a ton of pressure on these characters so that their value and everything else diminishes quickly. But anyways, moving on to Iron Fist. Iron Fist, just like another melee duelist of how to shut down the character with crowd control effects. He does have a block, so you never want to shoot when he's blocking because that blocked damage converts into HP or overshield. So these are things to keep in mind. Moving on to Iron Man, he's another one of those characters that does really struggle, especially in Season 7. His scanning characters are still rather dominant, so shutting him down is really easy, and that's just hit scanning characters in general. There isn't a whole lot Iron Man can do. Yeah, they did some buffs to him, but honestly, the buffs weren't significant enough to really make him a threat in any way, shape, or form. So again, your best counters are just hit scan. Punisher, Hela, Starlord, Phoenix, Hawkeye, other characters as well. You get the idea. Moving on, we come to Magik. So there's two ways you want to play group together, and you also don't want to play group together. In her ultimate form, you never really want to play group together because she does a lot of cleave damage, piercing damage that can honestly just delete your entire team. So playing it in a staggered way, so split around the map or split around where she's ulting is usually ideal. But always having and making sure you have line of sight of your healers and your heroes have line of sight of you so that if, she tries to dive on you, you can easily get healed. Another big thing, when she's ulting, try to, use some sort of crowd control effect right away. Typically like a Luna Snow freeze or a Mantis sleep, then getting your whole team to coordinate and focus fire on her right away so that her ultimate gets instantly deleted and she's no longer a big case. And you have to remember she is a kind of pseudo dive-ish character with a mix of a little bit of almost an off tank but not really there yet, as she does a lot of damage but which converts into overshield. So understanding that is a big thing. You have to understand that usually they're going to be looking for targets that are easy to get instantly deleted. These are your supports. These are some of your duelists that, like Hela, Phoenix, for example, if they use their abilities, their movement abilities, if you understand that, you know that she's going to dive into those characters. Collapsing on her when she goes for those dives is probably the best idea to get around this. A good counter to her is Hawkeye, Winter Soldier. Punisher with his shotgun out is a good idea, and just characters that do a quick burst of damage to said character. So moving on to Moon Knight, countering him is rather straightforward. You want to destroy his unks whenever you place them as quickly and as you see fit. So whoever it is, whether it's a support or a duelist trying to get rid of them as quickly as possible, it will always be extremely beneficial because it diminishes the amount of damage he's going to be doing to you and the rest of the team. Besides that, you don't necessarily want to play super stacked together, so you can't just, bounce his primary fire off of your teammates into you. So playing a little bit staggered and separated is a really good idea. And playing separated in general when you probably know he has his ultimate because he gets it rather fast with just the sheer amount of damage he does is a good idea because he will always look to, throw his onk out and ult at the same time. Your long-range duelists, your hit-scan characters are going to be the best option. Hela, Phoenix, Punisher, Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, you get the idea. Moving on to Namor. Just like your Moon Knight and just like your Peni Parker, destroying utility is the first and foremost thing you should be doing. If he has his squids out, getting rid of them as quickly as possible will always be a major benefit because that's less damage you and your team have to worry about. Besides that, if you're looking to counter his ultimate, if you're playing Loki, understanding that you need to use and save your regeneration domain, your Loki lamps, for when he's going to be looking for an ult. Typically, this ult is pretty easy to understand when it's going to be used, especially if they have a Groot enemy team that are doing the Groot Namor combo. So understanding that and saving your runes for the last moment of that is a fantastic idea. That is the only thing you really want to be using to stop his ultimate. If you're directly in the center, it doesn't matter if you're Luna ulted, Invis ulted, or any sort of other ulted, you will perish. He does 1 billion damage essentially, especially in the middle. That's why his Groot Namor is so strong. And kind of the same exact idea is your major hit scan characters, Hela, Phoenix, Hawkeye, and so on, counter this character extremely well. Hawkeye, not so much because he doesn't build charge on his squids, but certainly enough that he can outrange them, so these are things to keep in mind. Moving on, we come to Psylocke. Psylocke, just like your other diving duelist, your flanking duelist, Black Panther, Namor is a great character to shut her down, as well as Winter Soldier. But the big idea is to track her invisibility, know when it goes off cooldowns. You also want to track the amount of dashes she uses, but the big thing is just somebody marking her. And when we say marking her, it's essentially understanding where the character is and mirroring her movements, whether that's a Captain America or any other character that can fit that movement and playstyle. If you understand where this character is at all times and can just constantly harass and poke at her, she is not going to get a ton of value, so this is all really good to keep in mind. Then moving on to Punisher. When Punisher is in his turret, instantly destroying it right away is very good. Usually Punishers tend to play high ground, so try to force them off those high ground or middle ground advantages is a great idea. Following that, inside of his ultimate, you want to think about things like Moon Knight ult, although he can't get out of it, trying to slow him down in any way, shape, or form while he's ulting is a good idea. When Punisher ults, you can also use Namor ult or Magneto ult, a lot of different ults to counter this. Invisible ult is also extremely good, especially when he's not inside of it and he's playing outside of it. He's just shooting into an Invis ult. Everybody's invisible, so he doesn't get that much value. And by the time he's in it, he's probably going to be taking 1 billion damage, and you can easily focus fire him down. You can also, if you don't have these ultimates available, think about breaking line of sight. So playing behind pieces of cover or anything of the sort. Moving on to Scarlet Witch. Now, Scarlet Witch, I mean, she's not really that good, unfortunately. Basically, any crowd control cancels her ult, and that's really about it. That's all that character really has to offer. If you find yourself struggling with her, you can think about characters with crowd control effects. Winter Soldier is a good example. Or you can think of Hela, Hawkeye, Phoenix, characters that will just do a ton of burst damage or, quick damage at range, so she can't really do anything because she has to close the gap. But besides that, the character is pretty much useless, honestly, especially in Season 7 for whatever reason they nerfed her, but I don't know why, but the idea is that she's not a good character, so usually people don't pick her. Moving on to Spider-Man. A lot of people hate him. Trust me, I do too. But with Spider-Man, crowd control will shut him down. Yes, it's apparent. Also, marking the character, just like with Psylocke or any of the other flanking duelists, understanding where he's moving, where he's trying to play by. If you're playing near an edge or a cliff that goes off the map, you should probably move because he's going to look to pull you or some of your teammates off. So understanding where the limits of where you and your team can move to because of the map is a good idea. Things like crowd control effects does shut down his ultimate. Things like Emma Frost grab and other effects can shut his ult down mid-ult. The big thing is just marking him. So your Phoenix, your Hela, even though they're kind of intuitive because they kind of counter each other, Hela can easily 2-tap him, but if Spider-Man gets to jump, can do one-shot her pretty easily. Winter Soldier, Punisher with a shotgun, pretty scary. Hawkeye sometimes can also be an excellent idea. But just understanding just where this character can move to is honestly the biggest advantage you guys can have. Moving on to Squirrel Girl, who I kind of put in the same realm as Scarlet, which, yes, she can do a lot of damage, pretty apparent. But the biggest things to keep in mind is to play a little bit spread out and try to play away from walls. And I say that because she can bounce her shots, her acorns off the walls that can splash onto you. So understanding that limitation is a crucial factor. playing at range with a Hela, a Phoenix, a lot of the other hitscan characters. It's kind of crazy how a lot of the hitscan characters are the best counters to a lot of the heroes in the entire game. I wonder why that is, but that's just me. The other big thing is to destroy her ultimate. Her ultimate isn't invincible and rather has about 600 HP. Focus fire down, you can quickly get rid of it, and it's no longer a nuisance. Moving on to Starlord, a rather tricky character to counter. The biggest idea is to burst him down quickly. The longer he's alive, more damage he's going to be doing. That means he's just more of a nuisance in general. Understanding when he uses two, flips, that's when he gets his reload and his iframe. Understanding when he uses both of those are pretty crucial. Knowing when he uses his spin is also crucial because you have a window that he's not going to be looking to engage and he's easier to shut down. Also, characters like Hawkeye, Hela, Phoenix are all good counters to him. Again, a lot of characters counter him rather easy. While he's ulting, you can think of Emma Frost as a way to counter with her ult, or other characters as well. I mean, a lot of these characters just get shut down really easy by the hit scan characters because how overtuned they are, but that's the idea behind them. Moving on to Storm, she does amplify her team with both damage and speed, so these are things to keep in mind. She can slow you if she gets close enough, but the biggest thing is just keeping your distance against this character. Focus firing her down when she uses her ultimate, or playing head scan characters while she's flying around are the best ways to shut her down. She's not the best flyer in the game currently, unfortunately, but you have a ton of characters, you have a full arsenal to completely and utterly shut her down, especially with the removal of Magneto. She isn't as impactful and as useful as she once was, but she is still up there as can be a problem. Moving on to Winter Soldier. So for Winter Soldier, the biggest two strategy ideas to keep in mind is to call out his hook, so call out when he's about to use it, when he's looking. Those are the biggest ideas. Then you want to punish his positioning. After he uses Trooper's Uppercut, which is his biggest movement ability in his arsenal, it's easy to, move him or take him out of place, remove him from a set position because he's easier to pick out. Then you want to use your, long-range duelist yet again to shut this character down. Although he can do a lot of damage at range if he lands 2 headshots, you have things like Hawkeye, Phoenix, Hela, and others that just completely shut him down at range. Moving on to Wolverine, the biggest idea is keep your distance, and then you want to crowd control him when he goes for an engage. Another big idea is you can use a character like Invisible Woman if he's looking to kidnap one of your teammates. Same case with Angela, whether your push and pull. Typically, you want to pull so that he is out of position from the rest of your team, and you save your teammates. Sometimes there's an option where you want to push him away, but for the most part, pulling is usually the option. Moving on to Mr. Fantastic, basically the whole idea is to play out of range, and then you want to punish him after he uses his reflective rubber. When he's in his larger mode, your characters like Wolverine and Iron Fist, who have percentage-based shred, can easily, shred him down. But for the most part, this trying to get this, off-tank, pseudo-tank, whatever you want to describe it as, away from you is the best possible action. Again, after he uses reflective rubber, yet again, crowd control effects are the best way to shut him down because he is a character that has a rather large health pool, just like your Vanguards. Putting him in that chain crowd control is the best way to do it. Now, I'm already going to get roasted in the comments for saying crowd control and hit scan characters and long-range DPS all the time, but you have to understand, in this game, there's really just 3 main keys. Crowd control, hit scan, and keeping your distance. That's really about it when it comes to countering these characters. If you start understanding and seeing that pattern, it's a lot easier to deal with these characters and new characters that you look to introduce. They're all probably going to be done and countered the same exact way. Moving on to the Human Torch, aka the Human Vape. Now, he's not as strong as he used to be back in the day when he was permabanned and always super strong. He got a lot of nerfs, some buffs, and he's a little bit better now than he was in previous seasons, but he's definitely still not on par with other duelists that are extremely strong in the game right now. But if you do find yourself going into the Human Torch, hit scan characters are usually your best option, as he is a flying hero, pretty self-explanatory in that regard. But if you're playing against him, honestly, Starlord is a really good counter in my eyes. He's always been a good counter, because if the Human Torch is ulting, you can trade Starlord ult for the Human Torch ult, because he can't really do anything to you when you're ulting from the sky. There's going to be a lot of visual clutter and everything else you have to deal with, so using your ult to get a Human Torch is perfectly fine in my opinion, because you're just trading 1 for 1. If there's an instance where they have a Human Torch ult plus another ult, then it might not necessarily be the best trade, but understanding what you can trade and what you can't trade is very optimal against fighting the Human Torch, because he gets his ultimate rather quickly, especially with his flame floor or his lava walls, whatever you like to call them. That's what I like to call it. Again, hit scanning characters, typically your best option as he is rather mobile, so I hope you hit your Kovacs for the day. Moving on to Phoenix, this character still is insanely overtuned and overpowered, whether you want to believe it or not, and if you try to argue against it, not really. The character is still super strong. It's a hit scan character like Hela, but has more mobility and does have more impact because of her utility. So the big thing, you either want to mirror the character, so another Phoenix on the other team, ban the character, which is certainly always an option for a character you just don't like playing into, or you can look to multiple dive the character, just like Hela, just like Hawkeye, just like Black Widow. Doing a multiple dive is typically a really good idea. Typically, I would say Captain America plus a Psylocke typically is the best idea, mainly due to the fact that if you have a thing like the Thing, Hulk, or Venom, they all have large hitboxes. And Phoenix, a hit scan character, loves large hitboxes because she can proc her passive ability that does the Sparks explosion relatively easy and build up her ult charge. So a Captain America who can use his shield or an Angela are all great ideas. Then you want to punish her movement cooldown. So whenever she's using her flight, whenever she uses her teleport, you want to make sure and understand when she used those so you can easily go for a rehit if you're looking to dive her. So following that, just like Hela ult, as Phoenix, you want to focus fire her ultimate down as quickly as possible. Despite it having a relatively smaller hitbox, it has a lower HP pool, unlike Hela's. So if you're able to focus fire it down as quickly as possible, it's typically the best option. Usually you want to save certain ults like Rocket ult or Jeff ult or any other supportive ults until the Phoenix uses her ult, but sometimes you have to sacrifice those ults to get the Phoenix ult out because they will save it for the entire game until they get that. So just understanding where and when to place things is definitely optimal. I know I mentioned it earlier in the video, but if you managed to make it to this spot in the video, I thank you all enough. I appreciate all the support you guys have been showing me. Make sure to subscribe, I know I said at the beginning, and make sure to like the video. It's all super helpful, greatly appreciated, and lets me know you want to keep seeing these videos from me. But anyways, moving on to Blade. Now, Blade did receive some love, got some really nice buffs, so the character is a lot more usable, which I'm actually all for. I think the character needed some love, but that's besides the point. The biggest thing with a Blade is you want to avoid those tight spots, especially if he has his ultimate ready. That ultimate is serious. That does a ton of damage and can easily eliminate a lot of you. You have to keep in mind that he does apply a debuff, a healing reduction. Understanding that, if you have a Gambit on your team, you can use Gambit to cleanse these effects. Gambit can cleanse a lot of effects from different characters, but that is just something to keep in mind. The biggest thing is to spread out when he uses ultimate, because in that area after he uses ultimate, it still keeps continuous damage for a little bit, so understanding not to move back into that spot is very important. Now, he does have a lot of mobility, so using crowd control effects is a great way to shut him down. Using some ultimates sometimes are good ideas, but he does have a block or a shield that he can use to have some damage reduction. He still takes damage, but he can easily reduce it. In terms of direct hero counters, characters like Winter Soldier, yes, it's a little bit scary to try to hook a Blade into your team, but if you manage to hook him off, it didn't have a tank in front of you, shield off the healing, the incoming healing or incoming extra damage you might be receiving, you can shut him down rather easily, but it's just a high risk, high reward scenario. Moving on to Daredevil. Now, Daredevil, just like a lot of the other characters in this game, he's a flanking duelist that does a lot of damage, so understanding that, so crowd control, great ideas. Poking him from a distance are good ideas as well. Whether it's a Winter Soldier, Hela, Phoenix, Hawkeye, you get the idea. Poking him from a distance are great, so it takes him longer to get ready to engage into your team's backline. Now, another thing is his ultimate. Listen, you can look away from his ultimate. I've said this before, and people got all mad at me because I said this. You can look away from his ultimate, and you won't receive damage. Yes, this is certainly true. However, it's at your own risk. If you look away, you're not receiving damage, but you're open to getting some type of different ultimate, whether if they're trying to combo an Emma plus a Daredevil ultimate, then you're kind of cooked. This is why I say it is an option, but however, it's not the most optimal idea. So these are the big things to keep in mind. Daredevil's ultimate does do a lot of damage and just applies a lot of pressure, so it's probably in your best interest to pop a strategist ultimate for his ultimate. Typically, I wouldn't say, but in most cases now, especially as the meta has developed a lot more, people know to dive in with a Daredevil that's ulti. Popping your strategist ultimate is probably a good idea. Moving on to Duelist Deadpool. Kind of the same scenario as both the Vanguard Duelist and Vanguard Duelist. Same scenario as Vanguard Deadpool and Strategist Deadpool that we have yet to get to. It's the same idea, to lock him down as quickly as possible so he doesn't get any jackpots, and to burst him down quickly. If your entire team can crowd control him and then focus fire him down, it's a lot easier to deal with. He is pretty annoying to deal with for sure. I've faced him. Not fun to play against. Besides just banning him out in general, looking for those crowd control abilities is the best way. Poking him from a distance, as he's not the best ranged duelist as he is to close to medium range. Looking at a character like Hela, Phoenix, Hawkeye, the characters that maintain that long range distance are going to be some of your best characters in the game. Also characters that, again, lock them down with crowd control. Emma Frost, Thing, you get the idea. Moving on to Elsa Bloodstone. So Elsa Bloodstone is the newer duelist to this game, high pressure flanker, anti-type duelist that just thrives in a ton of chaos. She has a ton of mobility. And guess what? You know what stops mobility? Crowd control effects, freezes, stuns, roots, hooks, knockups, anything that can hinder her movement is a win. These are big things to keep in mind. You need to respect her trap if you manage to find it. You want to punish her dash usage. Her mobility is essentially her lifeline, so once it's down, she's extremely punishable. And you don't necessarily want to extend duels. Elsa excels in drawn-out fights where she can reproc her mark, ramp up her movement. So you want to beat her, you want to burst her fast before she ramps up, force her into bad engages with those setup or traps, and you want to fight from range whenever possible. She can do some range at a distance, but she can't do nearly as much damage as, say, Hela, Phoenix, Hawkeye, etc. than that. And that's essentially how you can counter all of the duelists in Marvel Rivals Season 7. If you have your own ways of countering certain characters, do let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear them. But anyways, on to our final section, Words Are Hard, our strategist section. Moving on to Adam Warlock. So Adam Warlock in Season 7, and previous, now is able to fly. Crazy. Same thing. You want to dive with 2+ players. You want to force out cooldowns, try to do enough damage to him that he starts panicking, pops his soul bond, or pops all of his heals. You won't necessarily win in 1v1 scenarios because just how much sustain and damage the character does. Unless you're overly confident, then maybe you can take the 1v1. But usually I tell people not to go for that because the Adam Warlock should, in most cases, win that fight. So diving with multiple players is always a good idea. Again, forcing out his soul bond and his abilities as often as possible, poking him out from a distance so that he's forced to use his heal. So Hela, Phoenix, any character that does some sort of poke damage, that makes him, waste his heal abilities. Makes his impact be, less impact. The less impact he has, the less healing, the less opportunity he has to get his ultimate, which is all super important. Moving on to Cloak and Dagger. I mean, honestly, after they used her the fade in the cloak form, which is the invincibility for a little bit, the invisibility, once that's gone, it's pretty easy to shut them down because they no longer have that opportunity to escape, but she does pump out a lot of healing, or they do pump out a lot of healing, so just trying to get rid of them as quickly as possible is a great idea. Long-range characters, Hela, Phoenix, Hawkeye. While ulting, you can use things like Hawkeye, like a Mantis-boosted Black Widow, to headshot them in their form. You just have to be aware of what character they swap to ult with, because depending on whoever they are playing as before they ult, whether it's Dagger or Cloak, will actually change their hitbox. Oh my god, words are so hard. You get the idea. Of course, you have Meteor M, Magneto's ultimate. You have a Doctor Strange ult that you can use right at the end of Cloak and Dagger if timed correctly. Can get her right when her ult stops so that you can maybe one-shot her so you don't have to worry about that ult. You can also use Jeff to eat them right at the very end, but you just have to time it correctly. Moving on to Jeff the Landshark. Basically, it's all about using and abusing how fast you can get rid of him. Insane burst characters. Think of Psylocke, Hawkeye can charge up and not necessarily one-shot him, but do enough damage to really pressure and get him out. He also has explosive arrows to try to force him out of swimming ability. Also, Meteor M, you can also throw in a ton of other ultimates that can shut down Jeff. And to counter his ultimate, like I said, you can also use Phoenix or Hela, just a lot of different characters that can shut him down. He is rather annoying to deal with, however, so these are things you have to keep in mind. Moving on to Loki. So Loki, all about destroying his clones as fast as possible. Less clones means less healing, less damage, so getting rid of the clones as quickly as possible is a great idea. Also, getting rid of the clones means instead of having 3 Loki lamps, you might have 2 or you might have 1, so just getting rid of them as quickly as possible is always going to be the best case scenario. Then you want to bait his abilities as often as possible. So whether it's diving with a duo dive, so your Venom plus your Duelist into the back line, or your Captain America plus Duelist on top of the Loki, trying to pop the lamps out as quickly as possible, getting out and then re-engaging because lamps are on a relatively long cooldown are all great ideas. Characters like Hawkeye excel because he can charge his arrows off the clones and try to hunt the Loki player individually to get a quick one-shot. Your other Hela, Phoenix, again, the list goes on, just how many characters can shut down Loki, but you get the idea. Moving on to Luna Snow, still a formidable strategist, but not nearly as strong as she once was back in the day of Season 1 and so on, whereas Invisible Woman definitely takes the cake now. But Luna, the same counters pretty much every season, burst or dive. You are looking for a ton of burst damage, whether that's some sort of flanky duelist, or you're looking at a coordinated dive, mainly because if you dive to Luna, she snowballs one of the diving people, but you still have the other to kind of cover your back. That's why you typically dive in pairs or dive in as 3. But besides that, for ultimate, when I think about Meteor M, you could throw in Iron Man ultimate into the mix as well. These are just options, not necessarily the best option. Now, honestly, at this point of the video, you might be asking, Duck, I already know all these counters, or you didn't say this counter. Well, yes, that might be true, but you have to keep in mind that I've made a lot of previous other videos that go a little bit more in depth. This is just me reiterating some of the stuff I've previously said, but also some of these ideas can be applied to a lot of the other characters and similar strategies if you find yourself struggling with a set hero, but you get the idea. Moving on to Rocket Raccoon, just like your Peni Parker, your Moon Knight, and your Namor, this character thrives with utility, meaning the quicker you can get rid of his utility, the easier it is to deal with him as a character. So that's his BRB, his respawn beacon. Getting rid of that essentially allows the fight to go into your favor, because if you get a pick, they're not getting respawned, and you don't have to worry about that. Same thing is once his ultimate goes out, you want to instantly destroy it, whether it's using a Phoenix ult or everyone just focus firing it. The faster you get rid of that, the easier it is going to be to steamroll the enemy team because they're down a strategist ultimate now. The big idea is to really hunt the BRB, destroy his ultimate, and if you can dive him, but he's rather slippery, so it's going to be a lot harder than you might think. So just destroying his utility and minimizing his impact is probably some of the better ideas. Again, your long-range duelists are going to be your best option. You could throw flanking and divers into the mix. However, again, he's super slippery, so he's not the easiest to try to dive onto. Moving on to Invisible Woman. This character still remains at the top of the strategists in my eyes, besides Gambit and White Fox. But Invisible Woman, you want to break her shield as quickly as possible. You want to track her invis, her escape. Then the big thing is inside of her ultimate, there isn't much you can do. You can focus fire her down with the rest of your team if you're fighting inside of that ultimate. You can use a Doctor Strange ult to try to go for the miracle Doctor Strange ult onto her, but she does have her jump, which can be a little bit scary, and she has a personal shield now. These are all things you have to keep in mind, but that's the majority of what you're kind of looking at. Is you're just trying to go for those one-shots behind them, whether it's using some type of diving duelist, or you're trying to go for the Hawkeye one-shot or the Hela to Phoenix 2-tap. Although harder to do, there are great ways to try to take care of the character. You can also use Winter Soldier to try to pull Invisible Woman, but if you're pulling an Invisible Woman as Winter Soldier, usually they're just out of position, and if they're out of position, you can easily punish that because they'll probably keep making that mistake. Using Emma Frostel to try to pull the Invisible Woman out of her ultimate is also a good idea to keep in mind as well. For Mantis, it's the same case of a multi-dive onto a strategist, as well as being able to lock her down, so just keep her rooted in place as she's more mobile with her ultimate, but also in general, she can rack up a lot of damage, so sometimes playing line of sight, so behind some type of cover, is a good idea. Their whole idea of this character is that she enables her team. The quicker you get out of the picture, the easier it is going to be to run over the enemy team because she's no longer giving a damage boost and healing boost to said teammates. If she's ulting, she's not crowd control immune. That means you can use things like Jeff Ultimate, Doctor Strange Ultimate, or any other form of crowd control ultimate in the arsenal. Moving on to Ultron. So Ultron, another flying character, head scan is going to be your best friend. Starlord is a particularly good character because Starlord can use his ultimate to counter Ultron's ultimate. And honestly, I think it's a pretty good trade. You're countering, or you're using a duelist ultimate for a strategist ultimate, but you're killing the strategist, negating the healing and damage effects from said strategist ultimate, which overall is pretty solid. Again, your best friend is hit scan characters, that's really about it. He does do a lot of damage from afar, but he doesn't do nearly enough damage to, no, for the most part, out damage or out duel a character like Phoenix or Hela, unless the Ultron is particularly and exceptionally well at dodging and using his movement. You should win that fight most of the time. Moving on to Deadpool, yet again, it's the same scenario as the other Deadpools in the game. Some of the Deadpools, whether it's a duelist or Vanguard, are extremely strong, yes. However, they're easily shut down by crowd control. The same thing is with the strategist Deadpool, not nearly as strong as the counterparts, but can be shut down the same exact way by using some form of crowd control because they do want to go in and get the jackpot. But again, if your strategist is running in like that, it's definitely not the best. Moving on to Gambit. Honestly, the best way to shut down this character is just banning him. He still is probably one of the most banned characters in the game. In terms of the higher elo, so I'm thinking Celeste GM up, I would say. All of these characters are typically just easily done by disbanding them. The character is extremely inflated, does just so much for the game that disbanding him is typically the best option, but if you find yourself playing against him, crowd control, I know, wow, shocker, is the best way to shut him down. Because of how hypermobile the character is, you need to be able to stop him from moving around a ton. So if you implement characters that have crowd control effects or CC effects, Thing, Spiderman if you want to, Winter Soldier, the list goes on and on with these crowd control characters in this game. There's so much crowd control that you can choose from to be able to shut down a lot of these hypermobile characters. That's the whole idea. Now last, and certainly not least, we have White Fox, which is the new hero in Season 7. So White Fox is a utility-heavy support built around mobility, disruption, and tempo control. She's slippery, annoying, and extremely impactful if left unchecked. She is, I would say, a main strategist mix. She wants to be a main strategist, but she also operates as a off healer, being a little bit more aggressive with a dive setting team composition. The big idea about countering this character is to force her cooldowns as early as possible. Her mobility and survivability are tied to her abilities. Once they are gone, she's easily vulnerable. Then you want to track her position constantly. She thrives when she's ignored, left alone, so being able to mark her in this tracker all the time is really big. Her biggest weakness is after she disengages, that's her window to collapse. Then you want to spread out versus her utility. You don't necessarily want to group up so you don't get charmed by her right click or her alternative attack. And you also want to spread out when she's ulting, because you have to remember, while she's ulting, she's dealing damage, she's healing her team, healing herself. So these are things to keep in mind. So again, it's the same case. You want to dive her with 2+ players. You never want to try to dive her solo, as she does do quite a bit of damage, has a ton of mobility, and everything of that possibility. Also, while she's ulting, she's not crowd control immune, so you can use crowd control effects to shut down her ultimate, whether it's a Doctor Strange ult, Emma Frost grab, Angela ult, the list goes on and on. Anything that has some form of crowd control effects that can lock her down and you guys can just shred her. Now, your best direct hero counters are things like Venom, Spiderman, Black Panther that can stick on top of her and just be a nuisance. But you do have to keep in mind that these characters, although can lock the character down, do a lot of burst damage, can be easily caught out as well. Winter Soldier Wolverine can pull her out of position and just try to force out those movement abilities. Hela, Hawkeye, Phoenix can punish her from range. Then you have Doctor Strange and Magneto who can disrupt her utility. You just have to remember that her weaknesses rely on movement, positioning, cooldown timing, and if you're able to track her and force fights, she becomes way easier to deal with. And that's about that. That's essentially how you can counter every single hero in Marvel Rivals Season 7. If you found this video helpful in any way, shape, or form, do me a favor, hit that like button, make sure to subscribe to the channel, especially if you like Marvel Rivals and Deadlock content. We're trying to cover both on this channel. Definitely come check out. Both games are awesome. And if you like Marvel Rivals Season 7, definitely check out the channel as well. And if you want to see more of this type of content, or you want to know, or you want to let me know how you counter certain heroes, do let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. I hope you guys have a great and safe day. I'll catch you in the next one.